Okay, everyone, welcome. This is Better Together with Nick Allen and my puppy in the background chewing on a squeaky toy. Her name is Lilo. But Cody will be doing most of the talking today, so I'll go on mute when the time comes. Introducing Cody Kennedy, City Council member uh, and candidate. Cody, tell us why you're running, what are you running for, and some of the things you're looking to do.
Thank you, Nick. So I am running for city council. I'm currently representing council for District A. And as you know, Nick, you and I have talked a lot. Um, I love Grand Junction. I love serving our community. I did that for a long, long time as a police officer. I've been serving Grand Junction for almost 2 decades. And I just believe in our city. I think there's a lot of great people here with diverse backgrounds and viewpoints. And I love the engagement. I love the process. And while I know I am not perfect, I don't have all the answers, I do make a solid effort at listening to people and trying to engage with people. And so, yeah, that's a big part of why I run. And then just looking forward to try and do the very best I can for the city and to make a difference. I have the flexibility in my schedule. I have the determination and the work ethic to really, I think, make a difference for Grand Junction. So that's what I'm going to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cody. Yeah, I don't think anyone can deny the amount of time that you put in. And it's as a citizen, as somebody that stays connected with local politics, it's definitely appreciated. So diving into your top three issues earlier at the start of this, we had Better Together reached out to every candidate to identify some of their top issues. And Cody, we'll go one at a time. So first one
Great.
being ensuring public safety.
Right. So obviously, as a retired police officer, this is near and dear to my heart. When I was running for council, I talked a lot about how shorthanded we were, and I think everybody's felt that, right? As far as, I mean, just I think traffic enforcement is the easiest thing to recognize the lack of officers out there writing tickets over the last few years. People, on motorcycles doing wheelies down North Avenue or Patterson, the speeding, the red light running. People get frustrated, and what they don't see also is the increase in response times to serious 911 calls, right? When we have, on occasion, there may be 5 or 7 officers that are policing the whole city. And that's just not safe, right? So what's the city function? Those basics, when you think about what you want your city to provide, really comes down to you pick up the phone, you dial 911, you want that response as quickly as possible. And so for years, we had, as a police officer, I experienced our city keeping our wages very, very low, like really, really low. And they had given us a pay cut saying that it would come right back, but then it went years and years. And this goes back to the recession, that 2008 9, and saying, well, we either need to lay people off or we're going to have to reduce your wages. And we're like, we don't want our friends, laid off. We'll take the reduction. It just never came back. It was kind of one of those broken promises. So we lost officers, had a hard time retaining them. And then our former chief, before our current chief, Matt Smith, we were under Shoemaker. And that combination, there was a lot of people that left under him for a variety of reasons. I left during that time myself. And then when I started running for council, I recognized, I mean, we were probably 30, 40 officers short. It was significant. And it was really impacting safety within our city. And it wasn't just police, it was also fire. Where one of the big things right when I was leaving was a fire station in my district, in Station 5 had the ambulance. They said, oh, we're going to put an ambulance out there. Eventually they did. They didn't staff it, right? So it was just a matter of saying, is this kind of a manipulation, in my view, of oh, well, we did what we said we were going to do. And for a long time there was just no ambulance out here. We built a fire
Yep.
station but just didn't have the ambulance. So that's that public safety expectation I think people reasonably have, that I called out. Once I got onto council, I continually hounded, I'd say, an email every other month or so with the city manager, asking for meetings with the chief, asking for actually to have the deployable numbers, and understanding, having the experience to understand, when you say, oh yeah, we have 100 sworn available, or there's 100 sworn, that does not mean that we are fully staffed on teams, because a lot
Mm-mm.
of those are going to be administrative positions or detectives, or they're going to be people that are out on light duty. maybe somebody had a knee surgery, maybe somebody's on maternity leave. So when I ask, I want deployable and I want the numbers of patrol officers, and I want how many officers of that number are in training with a trainer. So those two count for one, right? So it's that kind of knowledge and background and experience that helped me really hash out those things. So,
Dive into the numbers a bit more.
right, really understanding the numbers. So then once Shoemaker left, Matt Smith became our chief, which I was very supportive of, thrilled with that decision. Such a solid guy. I worked with him for 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
Solid guy. He really started working towards upping our wages. We were losing officers to Montrose, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and Montrose was paying more with less of a workload and giving officers take-home cars. So why wouldn't they go to Montrose, right? So it's that type of thing when you can go to other agencies, make as much money and not work as hard. When I say work as hard, we were so short officers that you have these teams of patrol officers that work all day long, and they literally don't have time to write their reports until they get off the radio at their end of shift EOS, and then they have an hour or two of paperwork before they can go home to their family.
Right.
So and it's not good for the city to be paying that much overtime. They're paying a ton of overtime. Shifts were so short staffed that patrol officers sitting around a briefing table literally would have the overtime sheet go around and around the table until all the slots are filled up, and then they could leave. Right?
Yeah,
It's that kind of forced overtime. It's bad for morale. So
and bad for budget too. Yeah,
exactly, and the budget impacts. So
yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I hate to cut you off because I know it's something you're passionate with, and I want to.
So I will wrap it up. I'll put a pin in this. So I will say, about 2 weeks ago, I'd had these meetings over and over, and these requests over and over. About 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I got an email from Mike Bennett for the first time since I've been on that we had reached our budgeted number of officers, which was 130.
Okay.
And I will say that I do believe my continued pressure on that was helpful. Credit goes to Matt Smith for making that happen, and for really, I mean, Greg Caton also had a hand in that before he left, but Mike Bennett is certainly helpful as well. So that success. I mean, I'm not just talking about oh, this is a problem and I'm calling it out. This is actually a success that happened, and I think my experience really helped bring that to fruition for the city of Grand Junction.
Perfect. No, thank you. I mean, I think that's good to highlight. If that was, it's something that when I describe you, you're somebody that takes an issue and runs to the end. Whatever that issue may be. Okay, supporting the construction of affordable and attainable starter homes.
Right.
Issue number 2.
Yep. Yeah. So this is a nationwide problem. Everybody's facing a lot of the same issues. So we really don't have any local control over, say, commodity prices, right? So we're talking about lumber or the plastics or the asphalt, the roofing, the shingles, the roofing materials, the concrete, all of those things. Those costs are continually going up, and there's other issues as far as labor and how we keep our trades engaged in the process and working locally. But really continually working for starter homes is really kind of that focus. I'll look for opportunities to support, what we call capital A affordable housing.
Sure.
As often as I can. We've done that with a few different projects we're working on right now, actually looking at some projects both with the housing authority and also with some developers, that some of that hits that 60% AMI that we're always or under, that we're really, that's just this hard number to hit. But we're working on that. Capital stacks are getting a little complicated sometimes with some of the interest rates and the way things are working, but I'm working in that area and continually advocating for that and having those conversations around that.
What is the price point for a starter home? Would you count right now?
So
what is it and what should it be?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Our average price of a home, and which is different than the question you asked, but the average price of a home in Grand Junction right now is over 400,000.
Yeah,
or right at 400, just a little over. But when you take our area median income, let's call it around between 60 and 70 for a household, and you start breaking it down and saying, well, what's 30% of that, right? And then chunk that out for a mortgage payment, which for us to say, affordable is in that 100 to 120% of AMI, which I don't, that, and that does, that 120% makes it tough, but that's a
Right.
third of that income. And we could dive into the fact that the state is now, for qualifying for rentals, they've changed it from, they've reduced the amount of income qualification for rentals.
Mm,
So, but they haven't for affordable housing
hmm.
purchasing. But really, if we, anything that's in that 350 range, 350,
Right.
375, to me is that target. Now, is that affordable for a lot of people? No,
No.
no,
Yeah.
not at 7.5%. It's just not.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that we see some, and again, way out of our hands. I'm hopeful that we see some interest rate reductions
Hmm.
in the year ahead, but again, out of our hands. But if the city can continue to do things like work with both housing resources, habitat, nonprofits like that that help people get into homes, I'm going to advocate for that as often as I can.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Those additional kind of outside supports or, I know the city's been kind of working with maybe some revolving funds for some down payment
Yeah.
assistance. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. We've done that, and I think we've also talked about how do we have kind of this long term source of funding for capital A affordable housing.
Hmm.
That's a tricky one. I mean,
Hmm.
that is a tricky one. Unfortunately, the city brought forward an idea about linkage fees, which I think was, it was. I'm glad it didn't move forward. It was, in my view, the wrong way to go. I think that was we were going to be shooting ourselves in the foot economically when it comes to job growth,
Mm,
both attracting new employers and for the employers that we have to grow.
mhm.
So thankfully that didn't move forward. But there's other ideas, and I know we have limited time here. We could
Sure.
totally
Yeah.
dive
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
that.
No,
I'll
I
stay on that here.
would every candidate, I'm like, man, I could have 2 hours here, but
Yeah.
no, I appreciate it. So getting on to issue three, finding practical ways to address homelessness.
Great. So this is a huge issue right now. This is
Yeah.
our conversation. I mean, we had a long meeting, kind of emergency meeting, reference the
Hmm.
resource center the other night. We will coming forward, but it's not just that, right? It's all those other moving parts, and how do we plug the right resources in the right areas, and are we making sure that we're serving the needs based on what the needs are from the folks that are actually utilizing the services, and then also from a broad spectrum of the providers that are involved,
Mm,
right? So we think about these nonprofits, and yes, we certainly have some very loud voices in the room right now that are very involved in that. But I
mhm.
really want to make sure we make space for everybody to be heard, and try to see how that fits in with the data that we're gathering, not just our pit study or point in time study, but also from what we're seeing. And I've had conversations with amazing providers like Mona Highline about where are our needs really at? What are you seeing, and what are our shelter numbers at? And
Mhm.
I've had conversations with Mesa County's Director of Public Health
Mhm.
regarding what kind of influx of homeless folks are we seeing, right? And we are seeing a lot more
Yeah.
from the Front Range in particular. There's been some displacement there where people that maybe they were almost homeless, borderline homeless, living in their cars, which is homeless, coming to the Grand Valley. Word is out. Grand Valley, not only do we have a little bit of a more mild climate, but we also have some great resources and some great people that really work hard in that area. So that's a tough one. I'm going to continue to advocate for that. And I know I've gotten some heat. Some people don't think that I have a heart for that, but literally that's one of the big reasons I do what I do. I work really hard in that space. And while some people might not like my frankness on some things, the frankness I've had, even though people try to make it about something else, is never about the people that have the need. It's
Mm,
about those providers, right? The middleman, right? It's the middleman that I want to make sure. Middleman's maybe a bit of a harsh term, but the providers,
mm,
that like, what's the most efficient delivery of the resources that we can provide? And by resources, I mean money, taxpayer money.
sure.
How can we most effectively provide that to really meet people where their biggest needs are?
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Yeah, staying on that point just for a second, because I know, like, I've talked about it a little bit. I think, I've heard the mention of just kind of an influx. I know there's a lot of new folks that are, everything's gotten expensive over the last 4 years,
Yeah.
continuing to get expensive. They're either, couch surfing or, living
Right.
in cars, or they're dropping out. We're having a lot of locals,
Yeah.
that with
100%.
generational families, and that's tough. That's really tough. Well, you mentioned just one thing of like, we need to make sure we're getting all the voices. What voice do you think is missing right now from this conversation?
Well, right now we've really been engaging a lot with Homeward Bound, United Way, mutual aid partners, kind of those voices that are really involved with the resource center, because the resource center is a hot topic,
Hmm.
looming deadline for that lease, and so a lot of our focus has been around that. And I guess my thought is that we make it very broad right now. That we really want to make sure that it's not just that need to say, well, it's all about the resource center and that model that we've been providing, but to say, well, all these other nonprofits that work in that space, Grand Valley Peace and Justice, um, you know, Grand Valley Catholic Outreach,
Mm.
Joseph Center, and I kind of default to those, and there's others, but to say, let's work together as a team and say what are those biggest needs. And the city's done a lot of work in this area. They've put a lot of time into saying, Tamara's team, Tamara has and done that group has done a lot of work to try to assess needs. And I think that's where we need to say, here's what we're seeing our needs are you seeing the same? Like,
Hmm.
are what's the how do we meet those needs that are most immediate with the limited resources that we have?
Gotcha. Gotcha. So more or less bringing the advocacy and the providers together
Right.
that aren't directly affected or within the, I mean, I think everyone's affected always, right? It's such a
Sure.
wide issue, but not just those that are working in the resource center.
Well, it's like our stakeholder group that we brought together for our impact fee discussion.
Sure.
That was fantastic, and we had people on every end of that. It wasn't just a builder or the chamber. It was also people from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. It was law enforcement. It was all these voices were at the table to say, here's how we see the impact fee discussion affecting us, and here's our 2 cents on it. And I think
Hmm.
this is that critical time where I think we can set ourselves up for success moving forward. There's always going to be additional needs, right? No matter how much we give, twice as much will probably still not be enough. But
Right.
for what we are able to budget and do as far as the city goes, how can we meet the most immediate and pressing needs to make sure that we are stretching those dollars to and getting the best potential impact?
Hmm. Nice. For sure. Yeah, we got to make the most of our money
Yeah,
always.
and I just to back up one step, and here's an example. I know that, and I just had this conversation with Mona at the Joseph Center recently, which is why it's fresh in my mind. But as you and I were, as we talk about people that are almost unhoused, maybe they're
Hmm.
either they're couch surfing or they are paycheck to paycheck, and then they have a serious mechanical issue with their car, and now do we pay rent or do I fix my
Right.
car?
Medical
I lose
emergencies.
medical emergency is a great example, and to have somebody a service, and it doesn't have to be the Joseph Center, it can be other organizations as well, but that can come alongside and help them out, whether that be we're going to help you get your car fixed, or we're going to cover your utility payment, or we're going to cover your rent this month, to kind of get them through so we keep people housed. It's not just the people that are currently unhoused, but those people that are really marginalized in that very tenuous situation, where how do we make sure that they have a little bit of a safety net that can
Hmm.
help them through?
Yeah, no, I work with a lot of those families. I know Hilltop puts in good work, so,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
a lot of good resources. But still, those lines are long.
Yeah.
Okay, well, switching it up a little bit. So I brought this up with your opponent. And there was a couple articles that went back and forth around conflicts of interest with, some of
Right.
her connections with nonprofit providers, and then there was response back in some way around some of the donations you received from builders.
Right.
And I'll start from my view. I think that just is part of democracy. Groups advocate, where they advocate for their voice, they advocate for money, they knock on doors, whatever. There's groups that want to support folks, but I want to at least give you that time to address it since it has been brought up and how you're
Right.
relating with that.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. I think I've called it a political hit job, which I see that it was. The fact that a builder, when they see an increase in impact fees, that those fees are going to be passed directly on is something that a lot of people don't understand. When we increase impact fees, the builder's not necessarily, well, they write the check initially, right, when it happens, but their model is that's included in the price of whatever the home is. So we're literally upping the cost of homes,
Mm,
and we may need to do that, right? There is an increase in the costs of running local government. We
mhm,
do have a need for increasing impact fees. I recognize that. I'm not saying that we
mhm,
don't, but the amount, if we can at all control that, that's that one little piece that we have control over. We talked earlier about commodity prices and labor and interest rates and things that we don't have control over. But for what little that we do, we should try to control those costs. For example, with our parks fees, like are we right sized on those and are they justifiable? Right, we need to make sure that they're legally justifiable and that there's a nexus for what they're being used on. So let's take a look at every bit of that impact of all the impact fees and try to keep those as low as possible. But to get back to that conflict,
yeah,
to say that if a local builder provides me with $675 out of his own pocket because he knows that I actually understand the calculation and maybe other people don't, and they know that, and they want to build a starter homes. They want to build instead of going out into the county or not building at all, which is absolutely a position that a lot of them are in. They know I'm the guy that can actually make a difference for them. They're going to write a $675 check, and as I think they should. And I haven't got nearly as many of those as I would have liked. But I've also committed just out, not because I needed to, but just to take absolutely any potential conflict out of it. I've said I'm going to donate whatever. I'll go through my list at the
mhm,
end of my campaign. Whatever person is associated as a builder, I'll just donate that to a nonprofit like the Joseph Center in this case, just so that they absolutely have nothing.
sure,
Like they try to come up with any way to attack me. That's politics, but you got nothing. That's all there is to it. It's like what little potential piece of ground you might have been standing on, I just took away from you. So I'm going to continue to work to do what's right for Grand Junction and
mhm,
to try to really kind of work in that starter home area and get people into houses. And if people are working against me, then they're working against Grand Junction.
sure. I think, well, there's, I would at least count it too with, in comparison with the Alexis. I think they both kind of were on the hit side of things, and and that's like you said, that's politics, and it's about
Yeah,
explaining it.
I'm not gonna dive in on
Yeah,
anything.
and
It's
and
it's just
and
it's yeah, right.
what would you? I've asked both, all the candidates, what differentiates you? Speaking of your opponent, what differentiates you? If you'd like to take it, it's up to you.
Well, experience. I mean,
Okay.
experience is the easy one. She's actually really kind of embraced a lot of my positions that I've had for a long time. I think whether that's in engaging with the community or homelessness, or even, well, the building comments you made on your show about requiring builders to build twice as many quote unquote
Mm,
affordable housing as other houses. I mean, if you don't want any houses built, that's, I guess, a policy you could embrace. But it's experience, right? I've served our city for 2 decades, right? I have a business that is that's about housing, right? So I know for everything from the cost of housing to the struggle that my tenants have had to in buying their own houses. And I have cheered them on, and I have talked with them about how important it is for them to actually own their own homes. Some people don't want to, and that's great. But I think it's good for people to own their homes if they're planning on staying in a place for a long time. If it helps them control their costs and build their own wealth. So
nice.
and so I'm an advocate for that. But
Sure.
but
So
yeah,
experience
experience
being a number, yeah.
experience. I mean, public safety. Public safety is something that it's a difficult thing with a lot of moving parts. That's a little tough to understand, and I have that. I mean, like I say, I appreciate the fact that she really is consistent with me on the things that I think are important. Um, but the experience is what really differentiates us.
Understood. Understood. Thank you for that answer. Different question here. So I've been out, actually be heading out a little bit later today too for on 12th and North, this one kind of supporting our VA workers.
Right.
But the past, there's been a lot of concern around with especially our Latino population and people of color in general. What can the city do to better uplift their voices and making sure that they're heard in major decisions around how the city operates?
Well, I think the city should be engaging with everybody and making sure that they're listening. I think we've made some strides in our bilingual communication, making sure that we are able to effectively communicate with people and that their voices are heard. But we can also do a better job of advocating. You know, in the time that I spent a few years as the housing coordinator for the Grand Valley Resettlement Program, I had that experience with
Hmm.
the Afghan folks that were coming to the Grand Valley, and how tough it was for them to integrate into the schools, right? For them to get bank accounts set up, for them to have all of these pieces come together. But we did have a huge advantage because they had this structure, right? They had this great structure where, you know, people from the faith community, other people would come alongside and really make sure that they were successful. And I will say that probably a lot of our other migrants that are in our community don't necessarily have that,
Hmm.
because we stood up this organization specifically for bringing
Yeah, it was a big kind of
Afghan
announcement.
families, right? So, but through that, I was able to see that what are those needs, right? And
Hmm.
it isn't just some of the needs are the nice to haves, right? That we have very culturally appropriate food and household items stocked in
Sure,
the house when they arrive,
sure.
right? They get off the plane. And a lot of these families had been in refugee camps for more than a year, and it
Hmm.
was and so to try to bring them in a culturally appropriate way was a challenge. But the real needs when you're thinking about how do we find employment, you know, and how do we make sure we're matching people with jobs. So, and I may be going far down the rabbit trail with that, but because I don't think that speaks exactly to what you're asking with this population. But I think that we can continue to um, be open and friendly and engaging
Hmm.
every chance we get. I think the city looks for opportunities to do that and does that in a positive way.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. My last question, and then we'll kind of dive into just, ways to get in contact with you.
Okay.
So, as a voter, and I know, it's been brought up a lot, occupations get brought up a lot. It was brought up in my campaign almost 4 years ago. It's amazing. But from your standpoint of, having rental properties, and I think that's probably a large source of your income at the moment. Maybe I know dual, let's say it is part of your income at least. I'll say it that way. Um, how when it comes to affordable housing, and both you and I know, and supply and demand, right? So how can where's the trust when it comes to, well, if Cody's going to work on increasing supply of housing, won't that affect his ability around charging for properties, because rent should go down technically if we have more houses?
I'm so glad you asked this. So you're right. You're right. If I was about me making money, one, I'd be focusing on my business and not spending 34 40 hours a week on city council. Um, Two, I just sit back and watch him turn this place into Boulder, right? You look at what rents are there or in the Front
Mhm.
Range, right? And here I am advocating for building more affordable housing, bringing more housing online, and literally all that does is drive down the cost of housing. If I'm ever doing anything that's driving up the cost of housing, like say, hey, yeah, impact fees, man, we need those impact fees. Let's raise impact fees. Like then you then think for a second, oh well, maybe he's doing maybe is self motivated. But literally, if people stop and did the math and weren't just out there trying to get me, politically, if they were being honest, they would see that what I'm doing is counter to my self interest financially. I've been, I bought my first home in '98, right? And as I was a police officer, my wife was a teacher. We would save a down payment. I got some great advice from my grandpa when I was in my 20s, right? When early 20s, when I bought my first house, is this should be your first rental house. So I'd save up our next down payment. We'd move into a place, start fixing it up, and eventually save up another down payment and move again. We moved a lot of times over the years, and that worked out well for us. I mean, it was part of that was timing, and part of it was just determination, a lot of hard work. But to say that that's a conflict of interest says that you don't understand the math. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, get the crayons out. We'll talk. We'll use small words. We'll talk slow, so people can understand that it's literally I'm working against my own interest. If I wanted to make more money in the rental market, I'd say, yeah, impact fees are great. Let's keep doing all this. Let's make sidewalks wider. Hey, why not 8 feet while we're at it? That sounds great. We could get all kinds of bikes on an 8 foot sidewalk, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how can we keep costs as low as possible? How do we get people into starter homes? So it's disingenuous for people to bring that forward as an argument. I think it's either that or they don't understand the conversation. So it's one or the other, maybe both.
I think I don't know if it's necessarily it. I would argue that it is a fair question in regards to like, it is like we just said, you're expecting if you succeed, if Grand Junction succeeds in fighting off the Boulder influence, Front Range influence.
Right.
By the way, I'm happy I'm out of Front Range, but that will affect your business at the end of the
Right.
day, right? Like it
Yeah.
would it
It
would bring down your price.
negatively
Yes,
affect
right,
us, right?
right.
So if the forces that I'm pushing against are successful, right, and we make bike lanes everywhere, and we spend all this additional money on wide sidewalks and impact fees, and we just keep going in that direction, all you're doing it's just it rents go up, and even if I don't ever raise any rents, the value of my real estate increases with all of those things. If the houses I have in Grand Junction were in Boulder, I'd be in a whole different situation, right? And the other thing is, obviously, I'm running a business. I have mortgages on everything,
Mhm.
insurance, taxes, all these variables. People try. It's this unfortunate class warfare that I think people are trying to wage.
Mhm.
In a way, it's like I'm a hardworking guy. I've worked super hard for a very long time. Blue collar police officer. My wife is a teacher. Raised 3 girls where we were driving old cars, not going on vacation, and that was a fact of life. And the
Mhm.
fact that I've worked so hard, generally working the equivalent of 2 jobs almost all the time for 20 years, yeah, there's going to be some success that comes with that. But that's from hard work, and that is what allows me to do what I'm doing now and trying to help other people be successful too, and bringing more starter homes online. So it's just an unfortunate narrative, and I think the majority of Grand Junction doesn't believe it. But who knows?
Well, yeah, no, I think, how I've thought about this question a lot is like somewhat at the end of the day, I think conflict of interest is really just in the eyes of the like whoever it is,
Yeah.
right? Like
Right,
you
and
could,
I believe that there is legitimate need for recusing oneself if there is a vote about something that I'm directly
mm,
involved in, right? And I
sure.
absolutely would, but I'm literally not building. I'm not building anything.
Mm,
So, and even if I was a builder, hypothetically, those fees would be passed on to the consumer anyway. So it's kind of again a bit of a false narrative, but like I don't. If there is a conflict, it's pretty easy to just recuse yourself from the conversation.
sure.
So,
Right.
or not the conversation so much. I
Or
think
the
the
vote,
vote,
right? Yeah.
the vote. I think the conversation. If in this case, if I was a builder, who at the table would have more experience about understanding those fees than the builder? So I would, of course, engage in that conversation, share with council what I know, and then ultimately recuse myself from the vote. But neither's the case with me. So
Yeah. Well, Cody, I've kept you too long. I appreciate, I would love to have a longer sit down
yeah.
at some point. I think this is great. I want to say one thank you and then tell me more about just how people can get a hold of you. Thank you on behalf of just the Orchard Mesa Pool folks. You've been a major champion. That's why where I get worried with some stuff you sink your teeth into, you've sunk your teeth into Orchard Mesa and the pool. So I'm like, heck yeah, let's get this guy, in support for that. So we appreciate that for sure. I know you're a tireless advocate there. And last question, how can we get a hold of you?
All right, so I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm very, very active on my Facebook page, Cody for GJ. Instagram, not as much. I'm occasionally there as well. My email is pretty easy, Cody at codyforgj.com. My website's codyforgj.com. And in-person contact is so much better than just, going back and forth on the keyboard. So if somebody wants to come see me on a Tuesday or a Thursday morning at Mountain Air Roasters, I'm in there having a cup of coffee with whoever's available, and you never know who we're going to be talking to there. And
Sure.
that and I love that. So I encourage people to come out and engage with me. If you are going to come out to see me in person, double check my Facebook page. If I'm going to be out of town or have another meeting, I'll post something up that it's just not happening that day. So I don't want to waste anybody's time if they go and expecting to see me. But
Got it.
that's what I have.
Well, thank you, Cody. I appreciate everything. Would love to follow up with you. You
Absolutely.
know,
Let's keep
and
talking, Nick.
yeah,
I appreciate. I know that we have a few differences of opinions, but man, I really appreciate your engagement, advocacy, and the way you try to shine a light on the process and help educate people. So yeah, let's keep talking.
awesome. All right, doing it better together. Thank you, Cody. I'll just close out here. Have a good rest of your day, and we're wishing all candidates good luck on the election.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today. I know there were several other questions that we all had, and we just appreciate the time that each candidate has given us. I know they're working hard, and hopefully you can reach out direct. I know Mr. Kennedy does a good job of replying and staying in contact. And like you said, we'll look to sit down again as a council member or as a citizen. We'll see what happens comes up next month. So that right now is our last scheduled interview. We sadly, Ben had some illness in the family, so we've still are looking to reschedule, and all offers are open. Oh, no, never mind. Sorry, we'll still have Laurel Cole. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so we will have Laurel, who is running unopposed, and that one we're really hoping to extend out a little bit, make sure that we can get some more audience comments and almost open it up to like a little virtual town hall. And so that will be announced here this week. And in the meantime, take care of yourself, make sure that you're staying informed, following all the news sources you can, and making this world better together. Thanks. Bye-bye.